Good morning. I hope that you are taking time to read and digest many of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote almost 3,000 years ago. It is so fascinating to think of his having the ability to think of hundreds of truisms that were so applicable then and today as well. Last week, Lynn Lowry used the word wisdom several times as he taught from the 14th chapter of Proverbs. And I spent some time this week researching the word wisdom. It is used over 222 times in the Bible and more than 46 times in the 31 chapters of Proverbs. Now, to be used that much, it has to be an important word. It was important to Solomon because we know that he asked for wisdom when he learned that he was going to be king of Israel. We know that he has long been known as the wisest man who ever lived, and that kings from all over the known world came to him for advice. Before I taught this morning, I wanted to be sure that I understood the meaning of the word wisdom. Webster says that it has a lot to do with good judgment, which one acquires from knowledge and experience. Here is the definition of wisdom that I use because I believe it fits perfectly Solomon's position in the kingdoms. Wisdom is the ability to make sensible decisions and to give good advice. That is what Solomon wanted most. And God gave him the ability to use common sense and to give good advice. Consequently, he is remembered more for saying logical, useful, life-changing statements than he is for being the greatest king in all of Israel's history. Charlie Daniels died a couple of weeks ago, and he is known for saying some things that are not very scriptural, as Lynn Lowry would say, but still will be remembered. I have always wanted to say something that would be written down and remembered. Charlie Daniels said, "What this country needs is a few more rednecks." He said, "Ain't it good to be in Texas?" He said, "America is the greatest nation in the world. Stand tall or crawl." And he also said, "Pray for our troops, pray for our police, pray for our president." Charlie Daniels loved Jesus, and he was blessed with a wise way of saying things. I saw a video of him taken last Easter as he sang, "He's Alive." And I watched as he spread those feet just a little and took a stance that looked firm and impassable as he sang the words, "He's alive. I'm forgiven. Heaven's gates are open wide." Yes, Charlie Daniels has now gone through those gates, and he will be remembered for his singing and songwriting, but for those who knew him best, he will be remembered for his wisdom and his love for Jesus. Two men, Solomon and Charlie Daniels. I read an essay a couple of weeks ago entitled "The Power of One." The author was talking about the incredible contribution that Paul made on the Christian world. And he was just one man. I thought about Billy Graham and the hundreds of thousands of people that are in heaven today because of him and his testimony. One man. It is still so close to July the 4th that I thought of George Washington, the father of our country, and his ability to put together an army of young, ill-trained men to defeat the mightiest power on the face of the earth. One man. I thought about Jesus, the one who introduced salvation for all to the entire world. I once heard a man named Charles Lamb say, if all of the illustrious men of history were gathered together and Shakespeare would enter the room, all would stand in his honor. But if Jesus of Nazareth would come into the room, they would fall to their knees and worship him. Only one. The power of one. Today, we study the words of one man. King Solomon, who wrote countless proverbs nearly 3,000 years ago. And each has a reasonable, sensible conclusion for us to use in our lives today. Our lesson is in Proverbs 15 through 22. Its title is Pleasing God, and it covers some 250 proverbs. Obviously, we won't discuss every one of those, so I will just pick a few. The first proverb we will study this morning is 15:33, and it reads, "The fear of the Lord is what wisdom teaches, and humility comes before honor." Another way to say that is wisdom teaches you to respect the Lord. You must be humbled before you can be honored. Once we realize who God is and what He has done, common sense tells us that we can do nothing but be humbled in His presence. This is the one and only God who created the heavens and the earth. I read the other day that astrophysicists now say that there may be 1 billion trillion stars in our galaxy. To write 1 billion trillion is to place a 1 and 21 zeros. And the same people say there may be millions of galaxies. This one and only God that we serve just spoke all of that into existence. I once heard of a first grade teacher who asked her students, if you could ask God one question, what would it be? Young Caroline raised her hand and said, "Teacher, teacher." And the teacher said, "Yes, Caroline, if you could ask God one question, what would it be?" And little Caroline said, "I would say, Sir, when did you find out that you were God?" We are powerless before this mighty one God. And yet He can do anything He wants. We should bow down before Him in all humility. Pride should be gone. Along with that sincere humility, God has given us the distinct honor of being one of His children in Jesus Christ. Yes, I'm the child of a king, and I bow before Him. Another proverb in today's lesson is 16:1, and it says, "Mortals make elaborate plans, but God has the last word." We make plans every day, don't we? We're already planning what we're going to do tomorrow. Last Thursday, I watched as Shirley prepared her list for Brookshire's. It took her an hour to put all of those plans together. Mortals make elaborate plans, but everything has to work out just right because God has the last word. 16:8 tells us, "Far better to be right and poor than to be wrong and rich." I have a friend at First Baptist in Paris who once told me, it is a lot better to not have what you want than to have what you don't want. 16:8 sounds a little bit like something Jesus said in Matthew 8:36. "What will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?" We watch the 700 Club every morning, and I can't tell you the number of times that I have heard testimonies by wealthy, or at least once wealthy, athletes, businessmen, actors and actresses, who will say readily that, yes, I was very, very wealthy, but I was not very happy. Solomon said it's far better to be right and poor than to be wrong and rich. Proverbs 16:2 says, all a person's ways seem right to him, but the Lord weighs motives. Another way of saying that is humans are satisfied with what looks good, but God probes what is good. This proverb sounds a little like 14:12 that says there is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way of destruction. Solomon wanted to be sure that we know that our ways seem right to us, but God knows our motives. Let's look at one more proverb. That would be 15:15. For the happy heart, life is a continual feast. We might say it this way. A miserable heart means a miserable life. A cheerful heart fills the day with song. This proverb reminds me of a story of a very wise old man who was sitting outside his gas station with his granddaughter. They were sitting in two old rocking chairs, and they would wave at people going by. One day, a tall man stopped and got out of his car, and he asked the old man, "Sir, my wife and I are thinking about moving to your town, and we'll come very soon. What kind of a town is this?" "Well," the old man replied, "what kind of a town are you coming from?" The traveler answered, "I'll have to admit that everyone in our town is pretty critical of each other and basically kind of unhappy." The old man responded, "That really sounds a lot like this town, sir." A short time later, another car stopped to buy gas, and a traveler got out and he asked the old man, "Sir, my family and I are thinking about moving to your town. What kind of a town would you say this is?" "Well," the old man answered, "what kind of a town are you coming from?" "Oh, it's a nice place," he answered. "Everyone is friendly, always trying to help each other, and it's a place we hate to leave." The old man smiled, told the traveler, "That really sounds a lot like this town." When the family drove off, the little granddaughter asked her grandfather, "Granddaddy, how come you told the first man that this was a terrible place to live in? And when the second man asked the same question, you told him it was a wonderful place to live?" The old grandfather looked into her big blue eyes and said, "Sweetheart, no matter where you go, you take your attitude with you. Your attitude makes things terrible or wonderful." And then he added, straight from Solomon's words, "For the happy heart, life is a continual feast." Rick Warren, in his book, Purpose-Driven Life, tells us your altitude will be governed by your attitude. So I guess I'm a little like Solomon. I'm the child of a king, and I bow before him. That gives me a happy heart, and life is a continual feast. Will you pray with me? Father, I just pray that you'll give me a great attitude, that I'm humble, but I know who the King is, and I follow him and bow before him. Bless us, please. Heal the virus, please. Bring our country back together, please. In the name of the King of Kings, Jesus. Amen.